We are back, people, continuing our breakdown of every single division in the NHL on tap for Thursday's episode. A beastly Metro division full of killers, and it's time to take a look at how things are going to shake out, both from a fantasy perspective as well as the overall standings, 8 through 1. Let's get right into it. Thanks for being here.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to your show. It is the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Steele and Flip. We are in the lab extra early today to continue our breakdown of all the divisions in the NHL. And on tap for today, as I mentioned off the top of the episode, it's time for the Metro Division, people. And now I really feel these conversations, especially for fantasy and overall quality of teams, is ratcheting up. And I'm excited to talk about this Metro Division because right off the bat, and Steele and I agree, this division is stacked up full of quality teams. And after the 8th position, it is really tough to find out who is coming out on top in this Metro Division full of killers. So today's episode is going to be a spicy one. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We see you out there, people. And Steele and I just wanted to say much love for all the support. That subscribe button is on fire right now. So if you're out there tuning in the podcast realm, make sure you head over to YouTube. Continue to smash that subscribe button because Steele and I are just getting warmed up. Speaking of which, my co-host, my friend, my brother Steele, let's get it. It's early. I'm fired up. Hit me with your 8th spot and your overall takeaways for this Metro Division.
This is one of the toughest divisions. I think the entire Eastern Conference as a whole is just stacked, in my opinion. It's hard right now to determine which team is going to finish last in these divisions and just the conference in general. Just basing it off of last year, I had to go with the Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah.
And I really can't pinpoint what's wrong with this team, but something doesn't smell right and just something doesn't work. It just, everything that has gone on for this team the last couple of years, it just hasn't been going right for them. And look, just looking at them from last year, they only had 2 players who recorded just over 50 points last year. Everyone else, they had 38 points or under that. So not a lot of offensive production from the team. They're obviously careless in their own zone, giving up the puck, bobbling the puck, and not really helping out in the defensive zone and with their starting goaltender. I do really like Carter Hart, but he's just a liability right now. Like, compared to his first 2 seasons in the league, he's not the same player. And I'm not sure if it's whether it's his own doing, if it's his mental game, if it's the team in front of him. It could be it could be all 3 of those things, but he is a liability right now. So I would be wary about taking Carter Hart as your first goalie. And, in an early round, I would maybe see where he can slip to, but that's just me. I'm not a fan. I am a fan of him, but just his game. And right now it's not all there. Yeah. On top of that, I'm not sure how John Tortorella will make this team. I think he either makes it or breaks this team right now. Yeah. And like I said before, earlier in the year, I just think it's really bad timing, and it's a bad fit for right now with John Tortorella and the direction this team is going in right now, because Chuck Fletcher has done an awful job. I don't think he's probably been the worst GM in the league so far. He could have done so many things this offseason, but look, this team for me finished in 8th place in the Metro Division. I have them finishing with 65 points at the end of the regular season.
You bring up a couple of interesting points, and I think the main takeaway here is let's keep this quick, because the Philadelphia Flyers are going to be in 8th place in this division. Too many improvements from some of the teams right on top of them in the Devils and the Blue Jackets. They just became so much better, in my opinion, with some of the additions they made this offseason. Look, Carter Hart is a goalie, unfortunately, near and dear to my heart, both unfortunate circumstances. I have him in a few deep dynasty formats. I really moved some pieces around to acquire him because he looked like he was going to be one of those next young goaltenders, good young career in the WHL. But he's just not there yet, Steele. Maybe this is his stepping out year when expectations are as low as they've ever been in Philadelphia. Couple of interesting pieces in Morgan Frost, Joel Farabee. Obviously, if Sean Couturier can be healthy, maybe Travis Konechny bounces back. Lots of ifs and lots of question marks on this Philadelphia roster from a fantasy side of things, as well as just an overall quality standpoint. Let's leave them at 8 because this division is just way too good on top of them. And Steele, I struggled with this. I'll be fully honest. From 7 till 1, I could see it interchanging in and out a bunch. But I stuck to my guns, and this was hard for me to do. But based on just the quality of goaltender alone, I have the New Jersey Devils in 7th again. And I know they're much improved, and I do see a lot of increased point percentages for these teams. But look, Andre Palat, a good forward group, some good additions, Dawson Mercer, Nico Hischier, good young pieces. Obviously, Jack Hughes, we could keep reaming off names. Dougie Hamilton on the back end. Lots of interesting fantasy pieces, Steele. I just don't see the Devils fitting in here with the goaltending tandem that they have. I'm just not seeing it. I don't know what you think about that take.
Yeah, I'll keep this short as well. I also have the New Jersey Devils at 7th in the Metro. They finished the regular season with 73, 75 points. That's what I have. And it's not based off of the team alone. It's just based off of the rest of the teams for me are just stacked right now. It is really a matter of if Hughes and Hischier can remain healthy and play more than 70 games this season. Because for me, those two are obviously the difference maker. But you are right. They made the right additions, but comparing their two goalies that they have right now to everyone else's in the division, as well as on top of that, just the stardom they have up front and on the blue line, I have the New Jersey Devils at 7th as well, finishing with 73 points.
You just made a very interesting point. When you have a division that has the goaltending quality that this division has, Shesterkin, Sorokin, even guys like Freddie Anderson who are proven in the regular season and are coming off a very good year.
Tristan Jarry too. There's a lot out there.
So Mackenzie Blackwood and Vitek Vanacek, I think a healthy Mackenzie Blackwood and a Vitek Vanacek in there as another option is an improvement from last year. Let's not get that twisted. The Devils are a better club. They finish in 7th. Let's move on to the 6th spot very quickly. And Steele, honestly, I could keep saying this on repeat over and over again, but I'm not going to do it, and I'm just going to stick to my guns because the conversation in this division is an interesting one. I'm going Columbus Blue Jackets. I know they bring in Johnny Gaudreau. I love Patrik Laine. I actually really like some of the pieces in the top 6 with Boone Jenner and otherwise. Jack Roslovic's an interesting young name. I just, again, don't see it on the back end. Zach Werenski, okay. Adam Boqvist, maybe. Jake Bean. I know you like Gavrikov. A lot of ifs and buts. And when we look at the elite quality at the top of this division, some good teams are going to get left out, but I will say this. If I'm a fantasy GM, I am keeping my eyes peeled on this Metro division in general for goalies, for forwards, for D-men, because there's a lot of good fantasy options. But in terms of overall standing, Steele, I say the Blue Jackets miss out again next year and finish in 6th slot.
Yeah, we're on the same page for the bottom 3 teams. I also have the Columbus Blue Jackets in 6th in the Metro Division, finishing with 84 points. I am very intrigued in Laine and Gaudreau play together to see what kind of chemistry they can form playing under the Columbus Blue Jackets. I will say this. I believe if Laine can play up to 70 games or more than 70 games this season and remain healthy, he could be a steal in this year's fantasy draft. That's just my opinion. He finished last year with 46 or 49 games played. He had 46 or 49 points. He was a point per game player last year. So if he can remain healthy, and hopefully he can, and he can get some chemistry, the Columbus Blue Jackets have a bright future ahead of them.
26 goals, 30 assists for Laine, and 56 games played. Obviously did not even get close to that 70 or 75 game threshold that you would like to see as a fantasy GM. That potential with those two could be huge. Definitely something to keep your eye on because the peripheral value of those Boone Jenners and some of those other guys that are going to be eating some top 6 and some power play minutes alongside those two guys, value also goes up with them. But we got to shift gears very quickly before we get to the rest of this division. Rankings 5 through 1 and fantasy value. Got a little heads up message for everyone out there on the roads. if you've been hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks, a few can become too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head home, you might think of calling for a ride. Oh no, you live nearby, you can make it home, no big deal. But what are the odds you get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, maybe you total your car. How about you could also kill somebody? Everyone knows the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that doesn't stop people from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there on the road right now looking for impaired drivers all across the country, saving lives every single night. So if you think you're okay to drive after a couple of drinks, think again, people. Play it safe, plan ahead, and get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over and stay safe out there.
Stay safe, and thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Don't forget, we are free and available on all podcast platforms, which also includes YouTube. And thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode and hitting the subscribe and follow button. Flip and I appreciate all the love and all the support out there. So thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Let's continue with the Metropolitan Division ranking here. I'll kick us off with the 5th place team for me. And this is where it does get hard for me, but I do have the Washington Capitals in 5th. And I do have them finishing the regular season with 95 points. They're pretty much the same team as last year, minus Nicholas Backstrom, who they gave who Connor Brown is filling that spot right now. I just think with Backstrom out of the lineup, it's really Capitals roster. And like I said, I think that's going to play a big part in why one of my bold predictions is Alex Ovechkin is not going to score more than 35 goals. He's a fantastic player. I mentioned this last year, one of the top fantasy players, in my opinion, top 5 fantasy player to have on your team, because when you take into account the shots, the blocks, the hits, everything he does. But without Backstrom, I'm not quite sure he can get up to 40 or 50 goals again.
The Backstrom injury, as much as he's up there in age, he is more than just what he brings offensively. He's a chemistry guy. He's a leader in that locker room. And he's Ovi's bestie on and off the ice.
Yeah.
We know that this chemistry thing could be an issue, bringing in some newer pieces. Anthony Mantha now has a time to have a full season under his belt in Washington, hopefully healthy. They bring in Dylan Strome, and you mentioned Connor Brown. Dylan Strome going to be eating a lot of minutes up the middle. TJ Oshie, Dylan Strome, and Anthony Mantha as a second line on paper looks really good, but there is a lot that can go haywire with this lineup steal. Injury concerns abound with the Washington Capitals, in my opinion, because aside from Ovechkin, who has been very solid in his career handling injuries, this guy is an absolute stud. He's in there every single season, start to finish, seemingly. Kuznetsov, Connor Brown, Anthony Mantha, TJ Oshie have all dealt with injuries over the last couple of seasons. And I'm just very wary about these Washington Capitals if they lose another piece or two, because the depth is no longer there up front. Connor McMichael, some of these younger pieces are going to have to really step up. And I just don't know if this season is the season for some of them. Maybe another 2 or 3 years down the line, some of their younger pieces are coming together. And I'm also wary of Darcy Kemper and Charlie Lindgren as the combo in Washington. Again, if Kemper goes down, someone who you and I know, Steele, has dealt with injuries almost every season in his career, you're going to have to lean on Charlie Lindgren and others. I don't know here. Washington is still good enough because they have Ovechkin, they have Kuznetsov, and some of those other guys that Connor Brown, I think, is going to be valuable. But is it good enough to get past these other teams in this division? Hello, Sidney Crosby still has Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang on his team. I'd say right there, that's not good enough to beat the Penguins. So they finish in 5th, in my opinion, as well, my friend.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so we're on the same page right now.
Yes,
this is probably where it gets a little change up.
100%.
I have the New York Islanders as my 4th team. I do believe I mentioned that they would be a top 3 team in this Metro, but like you and I said from the start of this episode, this division is absolutely stacked when you get to the top 4 teams.
Yep.
And a lot of people won't like the New York Islanders finishing in 4th place in the Metro. I have them finishing with 98 points on the regular season. I don't think a lot of people will like this because just looking at the team based on, who they have on the roster, the lineup combinations, when you look at it on paper, it doesn't look that good, but this is a great team. So don't get it twisted here. COVID-19 really screwed them over in the first 2-3 months last year. It screwed up their entire lineup. The lines were getting, thrown back and forth. People were going from the first to the second to the third. They had so many players missing out time. So COVID-19 really screwed them last year. Everyone right now is high on this kid Sorokin, and you should be because he is a legitimate starting goaltender in the league. He will be taken in the first 3 rounds of the fantasy draft, maybe even in the top 2 rounds of the fantasy draft this year. He is a stud in net. Hopefully, the Islanders can land Nazem Kadri because that just proves my point and my reasonings for having the New York Islanders in 4th just even more. But I think this team as a whole can just produce a lot more offensively than what we saw last year. I think of a lot of guys that you and I have talked about, Wahlstrom, Anders Lee, Beauvillier, Brock Nelson, who led the team last year. All 5 of those guys and even some of the guys on the blue line can really step up their game and produce a lot more offensively.
So this is our first disagreement point, but this is nitpicking now because these top 4 teams, in my opinion, all are good enough to go on a cup run. Let's be clear about that. That's number 1. So I think we're really just nitpicking now because these 4 teams are going to interchange and swap around the whole year. I could see this being the tightest division in the entire NHL in terms of the separation of points when it comes down to April. It's going to be tight, Steele. I think the Nazem Kadri caveat is actually very huge here because they need a little bit more offensive punch, and that's where I would be concerned about them going up against the likes of the New York Rangers and others come playoff time. So let's be clear about that as well. But what you said about Ilya Sorokin, I think I would like to get tattooed on me somewhere so that I don't forget. Actually, I'm not going to forget, but that's how important he is in this upcoming season, in my opinion. I've said it a bunch of times on this show and off the show. Ilya Sorokin is the goaltender you want on your team if his name is not Igor Shesterkin. That's a fact. Those are the top 2 goalies coming into the season, in my opinion. You could have a conversation about the top 4, top 5 after that, but in my opinion, those are the top 2. So let's leave it at that right there. This team is very well coached. This team is very well put together. They have size. They have grit. I think they're just lacking a little bit of that talent, but I do see them finishing in 3rd, Steele, just ahead of the Pittsburgh Penguins, because my concern with the Penguins is this. I mentioned some of those injury concerns with the Washington Capitals because of their aging stars. Those injury concerns apply to the Pittsburgh Penguins as well. And I know Sidney Crosby is coming off a great season, one in which he was healthy almost completely. But Evgeny Malkin and others, even Chris Letang, these are pieces that are absolutely critical to the success of this team. And if even one goes down, Steele, I just don't think they have the depth around them to make up for it. So those are my concerns, and that's why I have the Penguins in 4th. But realistically, dude, we could sit here all day and swap these ones out 1 through 4, but I think also it's quite clear who the toast of this division is, and let's get to that after the break.
We're going to get to that very soon. I do want to talk about the Penguins and Islanders because
please,
you are right. These 2 teams, 4th and 3rd, are. I do need to let everyone know about our favorite sponsors out there, where we are placing all of our bets this upcoming season, and that is betonline.net. Betonline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sport wagering information. From live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts, they have you covered for absolutely everything. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and actions happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Don't forget, we are free and available on all podcast platforms, which also includes YouTube. So make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. Flip and I appreciate all the love and all the support out there. So thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode. And Flip, you are right. These 2 teams, the New York Islanders and Pittsburgh Penguins, can be interchangeable. I just have the New York Islanders finishing with 98 points, and I have the Pittsburgh Penguins finishing with 100 points. So it's a one-win difference.
Appreciate
These
that.
teams, and this is just a ballpark. They could obviously be in somewhere in that area. I'm obviously not going to be exact on the points, but I'm just ballparking where they could finish.
I appreciate that.
I do have the Pittsburgh Penguins finishing third in the Metro with 100 points. This team looks really good on paper. I really can't find an area on the ice that makes me upset just based on looking on paper. I like the fact that they're spreading the love around now. They brought Brian Rust down to the second line so he can play with Evgeny Malkin. They put Raquel on the top line with Sidney Crosby and Jake Gensel. And the easy thing is they can just easily switch those two back again because they know that Rust works with Crosby and Gensel already. So I like the fact that they're trying some new things out this upcoming season. They they're trying to get Evgeny Malkin going and get his game going so he can play with some good guys. When you look at the defensive core and the guys on that blue line, Dumoulin, Pettersson, Smith, Letang, Petrie, and Ruda, this is an older team. This is the on an average, this is the oldest team in the league right now. But the team still looks good, and the fact that they have a healthy Tristan Jarry coming back as well, a top 5 goalie in the league, in my opinion.
Yes,
the Pittsburgh Penguins are one of those teams, but again, it's very interchangeable for 4 and 3 with the New York Islanders.
A lot of good goaltenders in this Eastern Conference, a lot of good goaltenders right in this Metro Division. And I said to you right off the top, and this is really speaking to that point, before we got on air, that all of a sudden, this Metro Division is now starting to hang its hat on defensive play. The Rangers of old, the Hurricanes of old, the Capitals especially of old, run-in guns, lots of high-scoring games. Now, all of a sudden, Hurricanes, Rangers, Islanders, Penguins, defense first, big, heavy blue lines. They're built for a cup run. Sidney Crosby stays healthy. Evgeny Malkin stays healthy. This team's going to be right there in the mix, Steele. That's for sure. Would you like to move on to the toast of this division? I don't know where you have, but I'll just kick it off if you're okay with this. You and I, this is the Blue Shirts podcast. So I have to stick to my guns. I think the Rangers, with one more year of Igor Shesterkin, one more year of the chemistry on that top line that we saw dominate at times last year, preambles galore, Hurricanes finish second next year. I'm going to say the Rangers take a little bit of a step forward. I just, look, again, interchangeable, right? Interchangeable is the word because the Carolina Hurricanes have one of the best blue lines in the business, if not the best defensive unit. Bringing in Brent Burns into a unit that already had Slavin Pesci and others, I love this back end for the Carolina Hurricanes. And if Freddie Anderson can stay healthy, I know I've been bringing up this health factor, but some of these players have that. I think the Carolina Hurricanes are going to be right there. But in my opinion, and let's talk about it, obviously, the New York Rangers have a lot going on. And I think one more year of them all playing together, I think you're going to really see this team go beast this regular season.
Yeah, we've been pretty much on the same page for every single team so far in this rankings list. That. I also have the Carolina Hurricanes finishing second. The one thing I will disagree with you on is that I don't think it's interchangeable. I think the second period, they're not, and you're going to find out why for the point difference. But I have the Carolina Hurricanes finishing second with 108 points on the season. So 10 to 12 points less than what they had last year, I believe. They're still a fantastic team. One of the things that really bothers me, though, is that I'm not really sure about Jesper Kotkaniemi being the second line center. I'm not sure if he's
good point
quite there yet. I think that's going to hurt them. When you look at the defense and the goaltending, they are absolutely in tip-top shape. One of the best goaltending duos and best defensive cores in the league right now. But you're right. The New York Rangers are in first for me in the Metropolitan Division. I have them finishing with 118 points. And again, winning the President's Trophy this upcoming season as the top team in the league.
Yes.
I like that they add Halak as a backup goaltender, so you don't have to worry about giving Georgiev those games anymore. So you have a veteran presence as a goaltender, and Igor Shesterkin's your guy. We know that now. They fill in Vincent Trocheck for Ryan Strome, who went over to the Anaheim Ducks. You and I talked about that once they made that signing as well earlier in the year. I am just praying right now that Lafreniere can show everyone why he was the number 1 overall pick and elevate his game to the level we saw him play in the QMJHL. He needs to record over 55 points this season, maybe even 60. He's playing on the top line with Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider, who had absolutely just mind-boggling seasons last year and a deep playoff run, and were the two top the top two players for the Rangers if you want to throw Artemi Panarin in there as well. But those two guys led the team pretty much the entire year, and he's playing with them on the top line. So he really needs to step up his game, and I'm just hoping he does.
I think he's going to get a look throughout the lineup to try and really get his career going. They also have another top draft pick in Capo Caco that would also be nice to see him get going, because I don't think the book is out on him yet either. Too much left in his career to really say if he is a draft bust or not. But there's a couple of things I want to point out very quickly, because you mentioned a lot of things that had my brain going there. Fantasy-wise, that's what I want to talk about next. But number one, credit due to the Carolina Hurricanes for allowing the least goals against in the league last year at 202. The next best team, the Calgary Flames, with 208. So this team is stingy defensively. And again, I think the top of this division, if it falls how I predict it to fall, with two teams from New York and the Carolina Hurricanes in the top three, those are three very tough defensive units, and three that are going to give forward groups in this NHL fits all season long. Number two, I wanted to mention a guy on the Carolina Hurricanes that I have double circled this season for a big time step out fantasy wise, and that's Seth Jarvis. I expect a big year from an interesting young player who is going to get a lot of opportunity to play with some really good players. Even if he drops down to the third line, Steele, I love the chemistry that he had for a little bit of time with Jordan Staal. Jordan Staal can feed the puck with the best of them when he is on his game. Seth Jarvis is going to have a good look. That's the player number one. That's the one I'm looking at on the Carolina Hurricanes as an under-the-radar move. On the New York Rangers, maybe less under the radar because of how good he was in the playoffs, Filip Heatl. That's a name I am going to be keeping an eye on in some of the later rounds, because some GMs might sleep on these guys. Filip Heatl was a top draft pick as well. He looked great at times in the playoffs last year, and another young name that I'm going to be keeping my eye on, Steele. And I don't know what you think about those two takes, but I think you're feeling it.
I absolutely love those two takes, especially the Seth Jarvis one, because I saw some great highlights last year in the playoffs towards the end of the season. I think he's a fantastic young guy right now that brings a lot of energy to the Carolina Hurricanes, and who fits well with Sebastian Aho, Teuvo Teravainen, and Svechnikov. Obviously those four guys kind of mix back and forth for the first and second line. So I really think he's getting his credits now, because he does really deserve those for me, because he has just been one of those type of players. And
he's just one of those names that this year for me, heading into the draft season, he's intriguing me. Some of those you get kind of caught up in these names. He's one of the names that I'm going to keep an eye on. So let's hold me to this prediction. We'll be back to recap a lot of these predictions. Don't you worry about that, people, because I hope Seth Jarvis has a big year, and you can come on back and say, thanks, Flip and Steele. Thanks for doing a good job.
Hey, well, circle his name on your fantasy list, and let's see where you could potentially pick him up. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your second listen, though, please go check out Locked On NHL. Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts, just like this one right here. So make sure you hit the subscribe. Make sure you hit the follow button. Once you do, you'll get all the latest episodes of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. We are ramping back up the episodes heading into September.
Yes.
Thank you so much again for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there. And we shall see you back here again.
Peace.